All right, guys. Thank you for the patience while we let people join here. So we appreciate everyone joining tonight. We're excited to have you here for our intro to management consulting session. I'm Jake. I'm joined here with Ariel, one of the founders of StepStone, and Naoya, one of StepStone's management consulting coaching professionals. So our goal today is to keep this session as informative as possible, but also candid. We really want this to be a conversation with you guys who have joined the event tonight. So we'll definitely leave time for a more structured Q&A at the end of the session, but we encourage you guys to write questions in the chat as we go through the slides, and we'll try to address them real time. If it's something that's a little bit more long form, we'll address it at the end. But to the extent you guys want to come off camera and ask a question, we'll save those for the end. But if you have a question as it comes up during the presentation, feel free to throw it in the chat. So as a brief introduction, my name is Jake. I attended a non-target university and I started my career in Big Four advisory and have since worked in investment banking. Alongside Ariel, one of my passions in life is truly mentoring students and helping them land jobs, especially those from non-traditional backgrounds like myself. Before we hop into today's session, one of the main things that we really want to bring to light for you guys to keep top of mind today is why students typically miss out on the top business jobs. If you attended our last session, this slide is going to look very familiar because these four things really go across industries. The four factors that we really see inhibit most students are: one, recruitment timelines are moving earlier and earlier; two, students often struggle figuring out what they actually want to do; three, universities often aren't equipped with the insider knowledge and resources to give students a leg up in the recruitment process; and lastly, four, students often lack the industry, or rather the connections with industry professionals to guide them in the recruitment process. So keeping that top of mind through the presentation, I'll pass it off to Ariel.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ariel. I'm one of the founders of StepStone. I'm a former Evercore investment banker and a venture capitalist. I have been very involved in the mentorship space over the years. I formerly built out Cornell University's investment banking career advising program, and I've helped over 100 students break into top finance roles. So we created StepStone to be the resource that we actually wish we had when we were navigating our own career journeys. From the stress of just trying to figure out what the right career path is to the competitiveness of today's recruiting process, StepStone seeks to help students in three main ways. The first, we provide access to resources and free events, just like today's events, to help students learn about different career paths and secure the top jobs. We've compiled interview prep resources, resume templates, courses, books. You can check all that out on our platform. Second, we offer access to personalized coaching from top industry professionals, just like Naoya. So our coaches are all real-world professionals with extensive recruiting experience. They offer one-on-one packages as well as group coaching options. And whether you're looking for help just navigating the initial stages of career exploration all the way to targeted recruitment prep, you can check out all the different offerings on our platform, and you can book a free 15-minute intro call with the StepStone team to learn how our coaches can help you. And finally, and most importantly, we help you land your top job. So we want to help you guys get hired by submitting your resume to our talent pool, which is accessed by top recruiters and employers. You can receive targeted job opportunities directly in your inbox. So with that, I'll turn it over to Naoya to kick off an introduction to management consulting. Naoya has spent the last 5 years as a management consultant at McKinsey. He built out Cornell University's consulting advising program as an undergraduate, and he's helped over 25 students land consulting jobs. Over to you, Naoya.
Thanks, Ariel. Appreciate it. Hey, everyone. Again, my name's Naoya. Really excited to meet you all. And seriously, if you have any questions or thoughts or want to say hello, feel free to come off mute or off camera anytime. You'll see my background here. The 2-minute version is I went to school at Cornell, actually with Ariel. And then I joined McKinsey as a business analyst to start my career. I did that for the past 4 years, right up until this last 2 months, actually, when I decided to take a management role at a growing startup, which is one of the fun exit options that I'll talk to you all about. But really, my goal for this session and really for you all is as an undergrad, I was a leader in a business fraternity, a consulting club, and as Ariel mentioned, helped set up the career advisory playbook for Cornell's business program, specific to management consulting. So like she said, officially, I've probably helped around 25 students, but unofficially, I've probably seen, hundreds of profiles between my undergrad work and then the last 2 years when I led the Cornell recruiting team for McKinsey globally. So hope some of the insights I share have some weight based on my own experience, and you all are more than welcome to ask follow-ups or any other ways to pick my brain. So with that, let's get into some of the fun stuff. So, we have a few things teed up for you that hopefully will give you an overview of the management consulting industry. I think the first one, that's good for us to all align on is, what does consulting do, right? So you see the top box here. I usually say consulting does 3 things, but again, people might categorize it or structure it differently, right? But broadly speaking, one is everything on strategy and operations. So this is working with the management and business operators to help them figure out what operationally or strategically do they need to do to grow their business, right? And an example of that can be, hey, there's a manufacturer who has 20 production plants across the globe today. Benchmark says they should have less than 5, so let's try to help them optimize their footprint. Another example could be, hey, a certain company like Coca-Cola doesn't have a capability in, canned alcohol beverages, or sorry, they don't make alcohol, but, some specialty canned drink, right? So they might decide to pursue M&A, right? And that would be the advice we give. The second type, and would come out of a strategy effort typically, is due diligence. So these are shorter sprints where you're working with an investor or somebody on the sell side to help identify whether an asset or a company that somebody's looking to acquire, whether that's a good decision or not, right? So based on strategic factors, growth, cost, and other factors, we'll give an answer and say, hey, you should invest in this company, or no, you should not invest in this company for these reasons. The third type of consulting, and a little separate from the first two, is what I call expert functions. So these are like tax consulting or transfer pricing, IT, digital implementation, other more specialized tasks that are little less so about strategy and more so about perfect execution and scaling, right? So there's a little less creativity around IT strategy per se, but there's a lot of nuances required to make sure that it's implemented correctly. And that's why you hear everyone saying, our CRM sucks, or, our X software sucks. So all 3 of these typically come together when somebody asks you, hey, what is consulting? Any questions, before we even dive into players or firms? And you all have any questions on the consulting? What is it? Any myths you all have heard, or anything you all want to clarify? You guys are perfect learners. Okay, so then if you go to the bottom of the slide, this is the typical way folks see the different consulting players, and also what companies rely on them for. And the 4 buckets are, the first is MBB, which is the industry jargon for McKinsey, Bain, and BCG, which are the 3 strategy-first consulting firms with basically the highest prices. And that's why we group them as MVP. The second category is Big 4. These are, much larger consulting companies that mostly originated from doing expert functions like tax, et cetera, and then grew to develop a strategy arm over time. So they'll have the full suite of consulting services that we have up at the top, right? All 3 types. Now, the second bucket is nuanced, where each of the Big 4 consulting firms will tend to have their own strategy arms that may or may not be separate from the strategy team within the Big 4 company. An example of that is EY has their own internal strategy group, but they also acquired Parthenon and rebranded it as EY Parthenon, which was a niche strategy consulting firm that only did due diligences. So EY acquired that knowing, hey, there's a lot of opportunity and demand for due diligence. Parthenon does it well, so let's bring them in and then integrate them into the broader EY system. Now, another example is Deloitte. Deloitte strategy and operations is actually integrated with the broader Big Four. So it's different from EY, where there's EY and then EY Parthenon. The last bucket is boutiques. So these folks, including Accenture Strategy, LEK, Oliver Wyman, they tend to do both. They will do due diligence and strategy and operation efforts, but they tend to be focused on a particular vertical or a function. So for example, Oliver Wyman tends to do a lot of work, both strategically and due diligence, for financial service companies and healthcare. Awesome. The next thing I'll cover a bit is career track. Each consulting firm has its nuances, but broadly speaking, the progression is, as a post-undergraduate student, you would join as one of the roles in the orange here. So at McKinsey, they call it a business analyst. At BCG, they call it an associate. So it's all different, but it means undergrad entry-level role. Sometimes, often, but not always, then the undergrad role will evolve into an associate or an MBA entry role. So if you join as a post-MBA worker, then you would become an associate automatically. But if you join as an undergrad analyst, you might be promoted to an associate within 2 years. Then you have your project manager or the lead, which is in the teal here. These people are responsible for the overall direction and success of the project. And then you have your partnership levels. Once you get to partner, you're not just overseeing one project, but you're seeing a portfolio of projects and also thinking about the P&L for the consulting company to make sure that we have a path to revenue, new clients, keeping current clients happy, etc. Two things I'll mention here. The first is, depending on the firm, there tends to be different levels of progression and also speed. So an example is at McKinsey, for example, if you do well in your business analyst tenure, you can actually skip the associate tenure and jump right into becoming an engagement manager. So for example, for me, I spent around about 2 years as a business analyst, about half a year as a senior business analyst, which is an associate equivalent. And then I then became an engagement manager. And so you start to think, a lot of these consulting firms, depending on your performance, if you do well, they'll promote you quicker, which will let you get to a higher role sooner, which will obviously help with your compensation and promotion if you want to stay in the consulting industry, or it'll help exponentially improve your exit opportunities if you choose to go that route.
So if I could just ask a question, what are, I guess, some of the main differences in responsibilities, making that jump from a senior business analyst to an engagement manager? How do those roles and responsibilities change with the new role?
That's a great question. So as an associate, you'll be working, or you'll be owning a part of a client project. So let's say, Coca-Cola hired us to do their strategy for both their soda products as well as their non-soda products, right? Basically, the goal of the project is to say, okay, what's the total growth potential across both portfolios? Now, let's say we have 2 associates on the team. One associate might take the lead on the soda opportunity, and one associate might take the lead on the non-soda opportunity. And then you have a manager who is overseeing both of those work streams and also putting the integrated presentation together so that the full deck is talking about sodas and non-sodas, right? So I think, it's, as the manager, you oversee the project as a whole, and then the manager is also responsible for dividing the project into work streams that each associate or business analyst will handle. And I did see a good question about grad students not doing MBA. That would also come into this, the MBA entry. So, we stole this from another source, but the postgraduate school role would be the associate consultant and consultant. Hope that helps, Stella.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So if the MBA doesn't have any internship before, so when he joined the company, will he be at the intern level or at the engagement manager level?
So if you're joining as a post MBA, you're saying
Yes.
you would join as an associate, and then you would spend 2 years there, 2 to 3 years before becoming a manager. So if you're coming from school, you'll either go into a business analyst role or an associate role. And then to your nuanced question, let's say you're, after your second year of business school, let's say you're an associate after business school. You might have done an internship during business school where you were an associate intern. Similar thing for the business analyst. After you graduate college, you'll be a business analyst, but you might have spent the junior summer before as a business analyst intern, which will also be, covered in this presentation here.
Well, for example, if I get the MBA and I haven't have any internship yet before, so when I join the company, do I become intern or like
You
become
could,
manager, right?
you
Oh.
could, you would become an intern only if you're still in school. So if you're doing it,
Okay.
in the summer between your college years, but you could have no experience until you graduate college. Your first job ever could be McKinsey or a consulting firm. Your role would still be business analyst.
Okay, got it.
So, and one of the we'll talk about this a little later, right? But one of the beauties is, I think consulting and the interview process really tests you, your problem solving abilities and intelligence in general. But there's really no tactical experience you need beforehand, and everything is really taught on the job, and at a pretty accelerated rate, right? If you're having analysts becoming managers in 2.5 years, so that I think that's one of the big benefits of consulting, which we'll dive deeper into later. Does that help, Trong? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Awesome. All righty. So if now that I kind of give you a sense of the roles, right? Let's kind of jump in. I would love to just share with you all a little bit. What is a week in what do you actually do as a consulting analyst, right? And I brought that Coca-Cola example a little earlier, but let's scrap that. I don't know much about consumer products, but I do know a lot about manufacturing. So let's say we have a project, right? You have your manager, your project manager. Let's call him Naoya. And then you have two associates or two associates or two business analysts, whatever. Most consulting firms use business analysts and associates quite interchangeably. So, you have a manager and two associates, and then you have a partner who's in charge of making sure that the project is going smoothly, right? The goal is, you're working for your client is an AI software company, and you're helping them market size this. Right, market size their total opportunity. What we would do is, right, okay, great. On Monday, let's make sure we understand with the client's CFO, which would be our key contact here, what the objectives for this project is. Okay, great. You want a market sizing of the B2B manufacturing software space. Great. We're on the same page, client. Now let us go in. Let us take a week to go work on this really quickly for you. Then we'll huddle with just the consulting working team, the manager and the two associates, to delegate the tasks, as I mentioned, right? So I might be like, hey, associate one, I want you to drive the data requests, launching data requests to the client so that we have the right data, and also to set up interviews with both external experts as well as stakeholders within the client organization. While associate number 2 starts to build a skeleton of the model in Excel, where we're going to do the calcs for the market sizing, right? Now, once you do some of that administrative stuff just with your manager, then you'll bring your the partner in, who's much more senior, right? You don't want to talk about nitty-gritty stuff with them, but rather higher level direction, and have what we call a problem solving session, right? So we might whiteboard and say, which different data pieces should we connect together? How should we structure the model? what should be some of the key slides that we share with the CFO at the end of the week, right? Now, if you do all this on Monday, you're ready to roll, right? You're aligned with the client and the partner within the team on what you and the team need to do to complete everything by the end of the week, right? So then between Tuesday and Thursday, it's really, you go and run, right? So the associates will go get the data, they'll crunch the model, and then they'll have touch points with their manager to review the work and make sure that it's up to the quality of the standard of the quality of the manager, right? And then once associate 1 builds everything in Excel, associate 2 might start working on building 3 to 5 slides that synthesizes the model output, right? And then on Friday, you might have your steering committee meeting or kind of your weekly big meeting with your big client to share the analysis, right? Hey, CFO, I know we just talked to you Monday, but we do consulting and we're really fast. Here's our answer in terms of what you asked us earlier this week, right? You asked us, what is the market size? Here's our first answer. Here's how we came up with it. Here's the data we looked at. What are your thoughts, right? Do you agree with the number? Do you agree with how we approached it? What are you concerned about, right? And that'll, assuming that goes well, you have in just a week, right? In 5 days, you accomplish an incredible amount. And, the 3 things I would take away from my spiel here is 1, consulting is just as much a team sport as it is an individual sport. So as you think about your interviews and how to really showcase your skill set, you really want to make sure that interpersonal skills, leadership, and conflict resolution are areas where you have clear examples, right? And you can see, you're working closely with your working team so much. It's not all roses and flowers, right? Especially when you have a client come in who's not very happy. The second thing is, I think when you look at this, right, what was done during Tuesday and Friday is largely based on what happened on Monday and what the CFO wanted based on Monday's call. So if the client wants something different, your week can look completely different as well, right? So it's really important, not every week looks the same, and this might be a very different description from another consulting friend that you hear. But in general...
No, I actually have a question that a lot of students ask about. As an entry-level management consultant, do you have direct contact with the client, or would you say it's typically the manager, the person above the entry-level professional that's having that back and forth, that opportunity to present? Like, walk us through that kind of piece of it.
Yeah, I certainly think it's firm dependent and nuanced. But as an example, the standard that was held to us at McKinsey is, within your first year, sure, you don't really have to lead a client meeting, get up to speed, learn the ropes, watch how other people do it, but make sure that you're ready, you're learning and you're almost practicing that yourself, right? Once you become a second year analyst, even straight out of college, you are expected to own the client relationships a level or 2 down from the sponsor, right? So let's say the CFO is our sponsor for the project in this case. The sponsor is like an executive sponsor, so someone at the C-suite level who's in charge of basically paying for the consulting firm. But oftentimes, it's not the sponsor you're working with all the time. It's the CFO's direct reports, right? So maybe the VP of FP&A or the VP of Finance for Business Unit 1 versus Business Unit 2, right? So a lot of those, the mid-level folks, the relationship is fully on for the second or third year analyst and or associate to own.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Any questions? We're doing pretty good, friends.
Get to the
Awesome.
fun stuff now, Naoya.
Yeah, and we'll yeah.
Yeah, question about the payment stuff. So as a consulting firm, do we receive the payment before we deliver the recommendation to the client or after?
Yeah, that's a great question. To answer your question first, it depends. Usually it's like 20% of the total fee up front, maybe like another 30% at the 50% mark, and then the final 50% once all deliverables are submitted, just so, you know, we make sure the client's paying something. You know, there's always nuances. Maybe the client really hates the project at the end, so our partner will be like, never mind, we did it, we'll do it for you for free. Or they might be like, you know, we actually, the client will never say this, we really liked it, so we'll pay you more. But, you know, there's nuances, but the biggest thing is, I think universally across all consulting firms, the good thing is until you're in a partnership level role, they don't really harp on you for the profit and the economics of the consulting, right? So there, you know, an analyst isn't going to be responsible for whether a client pays for or not, right? It's more, you know, is the analyst contributing to the success of the project, which will then speak for itself in terms of future payments.
So I see another question here, Naoya. Is it worth getting certifications to help land the position? I know there are SIE series exams, CFA exams, Lean Six Sigma exams. Are those only for specific fields of management consulting, or would they generally help with getting the job?
Yeah, great question. In my experience, no. Just because I think everything that's required to be taught will be taught to you if it is necessary. The caveat is you can apply for one of two types of roles in consulting. You can apply for a generalist role. So McKinsey has a generalist business analyst program, which means you'll join as an analyst, but for the first 2 years, you're not going to be focused on any industry or function. And instead, you're asked to complete projects in completely different fields and types of work so that you get a random walk of what you like in a generalist capacity before you specialize. So in that case, you certainly, you know, that's kind of what I did. And the only maybe prep I did was I took one financial accounting class as an undergrad, which I don't really think is mission critical either. Now, some consulting firms, including McKinsey, will also let you apply for a particular practice. So maybe you're really interested in manufacturing lean operations, and so you're going to apply to the McKinsey's business analyst program for the manufacturing practice. Then it might be helpful for you to take a license or, you know, like a license or certification related to the industry to prove your interest in that particular function. But there are plenty of other ways to showcase that, you know, be it an internship in that field, even if not, right? You know, maybe you found a professor on the campus who does work related to that field, and so you were able to do some research with him or her. So I'm happy to talk. It's a little case dependent, but happy to chat if anyone has a particular expert area they're looking to apply for.
Awesome. Likes and dislikes.
Awesome. So, you know, here's a little bit of my raw take on likes and dislikes, right? I think the dislikes list should be a lot longer, but I think each bullet just carries a lot more weight. So, but, you know, again, right, I spent, you know, most folks spend 2, 3, you know, in my case, 4 years. So the likes definitely outweigh the dislikes, right? First, I think is solid pay. You know, when you, as an entry level post undergrad, it may not be as lucrative as investment banking, but it's still very solid pay for a first job out of undergrad. And as I had mentioned earlier, if you're performing well and you get promoted sooner, that just means that your compensation is going to grow quicker, right? So at McKinsey, as an example, you can jump from a business analyst salary to an engagement manager salary, which is higher than an associate salary who joins out of post-grad, right? So within 2.5 years, you can go from making entry-level money to money better than people who get a job after their MBA.
What can entry-level consulting analysts expect to make?
Yeah, I think these days it's anywhere from, I think it's around 100 to 110 in base for MBB, and probably around 90 to 100 for Big Four and boutiques, et cetera. In that range.
That's just the base salary. That's not factored in bonus.
Yeah, base for the first year. And then bonus it tends to be lower on your first year. You know, if you're making 100K, I wouldn't expect more than 15 to 30K in bonus. But that percentage will increase pretty exponentially as you grow higher in tenure. because, by the time you make partner, you're making more in bonus than in base. And then as a manager, it's about 70 to 80% of the base salary. But actually it can be anywhere from 0% to 70% of your base salary, depending on how you're performing and what your rating is.
So bonus is never guaranteed, but
No.
typically
Yes.
it's paid out.
Yeah. The second thing I really like, right, is the diversity of work. As I mentioned, I was a generalist for my first 2 years. So I did everything from helping a regional hospital project how many COVID patients they were going to get during March 2020. I helped a big mobile and telecommunication provider build out their 5G infrastructure in the Midwest. I helped a tobacco company figure out their pricing for packs of cigarettes. And I helped an engine manufacturer come up with a pricing algorithm that basically automated how much they should be paying for, or they should be selling their engines for, and also for servicing afterwards, right? So really, you get all the types of exposure, and it basically helps you delay your decision on what you really want to do in life, right? If you haven't figured that out yet. Seniority of the clients you interact with. This, again, like I mentioned, you have, in consulting, you have the responsibility to manage client relationships. That also comes with the benefits. You're working with these clients every day, and they tend to be the most influential people within the company because they were chosen to be a part of the project with the consulting firm, which they're paying a lot of resources for. So you'll end up having really genuine, honest relationships with even VPs, presidents of organizations, because at the end of the day, they're people, and they might not like consultants at first, but if you're a good counselor and you talk them through change, get to know them a little bit, they'll become your friends for life, as it was the case for quite a few of my clients during my time at McKinsey. Smart colleagues and team, I think all can be, this one goes without saying. Consulting firms definitely have a high standard for the talent they bring in through their interview process. But in return, you're going to be in an environment where everyone around you is very bright, right? And I think those are the types of environments where you'll see growth the most in yourself. Wide exit options, like I mentioned, you could go work for a strategy or an industry role for a Fortune 500. You could go to business school to, again, defer your decision on what you really want to do. Or you could go to PE, both in an investments team, where some PE firms will hire from consulting firms, whereas others don't. So I'm happy to speak about that nuance if the question comes up.
Just to come out, PE stands for private equity.
Private equity, yep. And then the other type of private equity is private equity operations, which is more working with the portfolio companies once the PE company acquires the asset. That type of work is very similar to consulting strategy and operations, so it tends to be a big exit. Or you might be one of the McKinsey colleagues that say, scrap this, I have my own great idea, let me go start a company, and then go hire McKinsey folks, like in my case, where the founder of my startup, as well as 15 of the 60 employees are ex-McKinsey folks. So that I think also speaks to the network you get from your consulting firm, even beyond, for the rest of your career. And then for the most part, until you're a manager, you're going to have no weekend work. And I think that's just that's a fair given in the industry that tends to be a really protected something that every consultant tends to value. Olga?
I think Misha had a question. Does McKinsey allow analysts to request project in specific industries if they start to build an interest, even if they're a generalist?
Great question. Yes, the answer is yes. So at McKinsey, you'll have basically a project staffer alongside you at all times. You can be very active about your preferences. It doesn't always mean you're going to have the perfect project lined up for you. Let's say you're up for staffing on June 1st. There's only so many projects starting up on June 1st that you might not get the exact generative AI investing strategy project, with OpenAI that you're looking for. But you can state your preferences, and they will make sure to staff you on that prioritize that staffing. So you'll get on it at least a few times over your first 2 years. The only exception is as you become more tenured, you'll start to develop relationships with partners who lead particular industries or types of work. So if you say you really like Gen AI stuff, maybe in your first year, you scope out, on your company website, who are the partners and senior partners who do work within generative AI? How can I get coffee with them over the first year so that they get to know me, my name, etc. And then you start to, and by the time you develop a relationship in this year, your second year, you can reach out to them directly and be like, hey, do you have any projects coming up? I'm up for staffing in about a month. And that's also, that's another way. I didn't have it explicitly here, but that's where you start to develop meaningful mentor relationships. That'll really be a catalyst for your career growth.
I think Olga had a question if you want to hop off. There you go.
Yeah, hi guys. First, thank you so much for hosting this session. It's been very insightful. My name is Olga Ineza. I'm currently a finance and data student at Mercy, which is definitely a non-target school. So I love what StepStone is doing. But my question is, what are like the key things for you, Naoya, that you did to be a standout and to be promoted quicker? So what can we be doing now to excel once we get to the role, or even just excel through the interview process? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do like to separate what does it require to be successful in the interview versus what does it require to be successful on the job. So would it be more helpful for the interview side, or would you like to hear about the job aspect as well?
Yes, please. Interview side.
Oh yeah, an interview. I think we also we have that coming up, but why don't I? Should we just jump to that real quick?
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, it's
No
good.
worries.
We can jump to the slide. We'll double back to recruitment after.
Sorry, maybe one slide after. Sorry, the slide before, yeah. So really, standing out as a candidate to me is two things. One is a clear story, which is typically via your resume, right? Or maybe a cover letter, but really just your resume of, who you are and why are you interested in consulting. And this doesn't mean you need a particular type of internship or a particular type of job before you recruit. It's just, regardless of what internships you do beforehand, you just need to be able to speak eloquently to why you're interested in consulting and that firm. The second thing, and there's only two things on this list, is the case interview, right? And this is because the interview really just has two components. It has the behavioral questions, which asks you about your story, what you're good at, how you would respond to certain situations. And then the technical portion is what we call a case study interview, which we have, we could spend another 5 hours on best practices there, but plain and simple, when it comes to casing, you should start prepping at least 2 to 4 months, 2 to 6 months ahead of the interview. And it's less, studying 10 hours a day for it, but rather getting repetition. So even if you only study 5 hours a week, you're doing it consistently, making sure that you're casing every week just to get the repetition and the muscle memory down. I found that to be the most systematic way to crush the case interview, because if you have enough repetition with feedback from coaches who've been through the interview before, it's only a matter of time before you get refined to the point where you're going to crush the case interview, right? And the best thing about case interviews is you might not know the exact prompt, but you know what are the 5 or 6 types of questions they might ask you. So it's easy to prep, but it takes time and effort and a little bit of planning ahead of time. And then if we jump to the next slide, this deep dives a little bit more, Olga, into what you were saying, which is, failure mode 1 is on the case interview. One of the big things that comes up is frameworks, right? But you can't, some candidates can't case beyond basic frameworks. So they might memorize a framework like the profit and loss or the market entry framework. But if they get a nuanced type of prompt or one that's different from the traditional frameworks, they can't adapt. Which again goes back to my point on muscle memory and repetition, right? Do a bunch of different types of cases, and before you know it, you're going to be able to do every single one really well. And there's only so many types of cases, so don't be too intimidated. Second, I could certainly work on this today, but I'm a little tired, is my synthesis and communication, right? So, you know, half the battle of the case interview is the right answer on paper. So did you do the math correctly? Did you come up with the right framework? The other half of the battle is how are you delivering that to the interviewer, right? So if you're structured in your framework and you have a 30-second summary of it, you're gonna come off great because you have a great answer on paper and you delivered it really well. But if your answer is long-winded and it's over 100 seconds long per se, your answer on paper might be great, but maybe the messaging hasn't gone across to the interviewer, or the interviewer recognizes a risk that this person's smart, but maybe he or she isn't going to be the best at communicating to clients who tend to be, you know, simple and archaic and like to stick to their own ways. Third is GPA. Consulting, and I'm not sure why, but there's always been a bit of an industry bias towards GPA. And so again, these are one of the things, right? You all can start working right now, have been working on, and will continue to work on, is bullets 3 and 4, is GPA, as well as extracurricular leadership. And leadership is different from involvement in that, you know, in your freshman and sophomore years, you're going to want to join clubs. But then by your late sophomore, junior to senior year, your resume hopefully will show that you not only joined those clubs, but you put effort in and you were recognized by others to be promoted to a leadership, let's say an executive board role. And again, those are things that we look for in the resume screen, is not just what club were you in, but what kind of role did you play? What did you actually do in the club? Did you add value? Did you create something new, et cetera? And then the fifth one again goes back to what I mentioned in the previous slide. But really, that's how it all comes together.
Naoya, a follow-up question. I think Olga alluded to this a bit, but to begin with, getting into MBB or any top consulting role is the competition is very high, 2 to 3% acceptance rate. If you go to a non-target school, it's a little bit more challenging because you have less alumni you can reach out to begin with, or there's just less infrastructure at that school to set you up. So what would you kind of recommend to students who go to a non-target school but are super ambitious and are really interested in pursuing consulting?
Yeah, I think there's 4 things I would do. The first is, whether it be LinkedIn or any other ways that you can identify folks who work at the company, just find them and shoot them a cold email and try to get at least time with them on to network. The reason for that is, if you come from a non-target school, you might be pooled into the general application pool instead of an application for McKinsey for Cornell, as an example. For most recruiting firms, how the general application pool works is it's kind of idle until there's something that flags that candidate out of that pool, which typically tends to be a reference or a really good resume that gets screened. So maximizing your odds really, for me, comes down to reference, which I think is a function of, frankly, it could be somebody you met once or twice, but in a 15 to 20-minute call, you showed enough interest for that candidate, for that person who works there, to submit a reference for you. And again, these aren't formal. These are definitely not as formal as the word reference suggests. You can get it after 1, maybe 2 calls, but the key is to network, get your name out there, and also be able to practice and refine your story that you're sharing with these people on who you are and why you're interested in consulting. And you can also sharpen that pitch based on the feedback and receptiveness from each call.
Perfect. And I'm seeing another question. What would these target schools be? Are they just the T20, or is it more specific than that?
It does depend on the consulting firm. So for example, Cornell University is a target for McKinsey, but it's not a target for Bain. And it just became a target for BCG. So it does evolve a bit, but you know, just for simplicity, I would say I think target schools tend to be, you know, let's call it like the Ivies plus, you know, I think top 15 to 20 seems reasonable. With the exception of, you know, not boutique colleges, that's the wrong word, but, you know, the Williams, the Bodwins, Amhersts of the world. I'm blanking on the name. Liberal arts colleges.
Liberal arts, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess I do want to reiterate that I know that that might sound discouraging, but in my time at McKinsey, there have been plenty of folks who came from non-target schools. And frankly, those are some of the best performers and best colleagues that I've ever met. It certainly took longer for them, more effort up front, more time. But, I think to some extent, we all got to put in our best effort, no matter where we come from and, depending on what your goals are. So I hope, you all approach this with excitement and positivity on it.
Yeah, and Naoya, I would caveat that by saying, that's applicable for the MBB, the McKinsey Bain BCG. But if you look at, say the big four accounting firms that have the consulting arms that Naoya touched on, their target schools could be different than a McKinsey. For example, I started my career at EY, Ernst & Young, and I went to Lehigh University undergrad, and Lehigh was a target school for EY, for KPMG, for PwC. So, that was a school on their radar. Coming from a non-target background, again, like Naoya said, the most important thing, even if you're at a target school, is to network. The more people that know your name and have had a positive experience with you at that firm and can speak to that, that's going to give you the biggest leg up, no matter what your resume says. Because if no one's going to vouch for you, then your chances dramatically go down. So networking is really the key.
I think Misha had a follow-up. If you've networked with multiple people, does it help to have multiple referrals, or does it not make a difference as long as you have one referral?
That's a great question. Again, firm dependent. I actually don't know the exact answer. My guidance, based on what I've seen, if you have one referral, you're doing really good. If you have 2 to 3 referrals, you're great. Anything more than 4 is probably not adding incremental value, unless it's somebody who is at least an associate, someone in a partnership level role. So
would you recommend that an entry-level student who's recruiting reach out to a junior professional for recruiting or a senior professional at the firm from a networking standpoint? Yeah.
I think best case scenario, you do both. But if you want to prioritize, one, do the more recent joiners, the more recent graduates. They'll be more willing to jump on the phone with you and also be a little more honest about what the job is, what they like, and what they don't like. I would still reach out to the partner level roles. Let's say you reach out to 20 and you get a response from 1, right? What you can then strategically do is schedule your calls with the more recent analysts beforehand, so that when it comes time for that big partner call, you have a lot of context about that firm already, and you can have a more educated set of questions to make a good impression.
Okay, Olga, I see you have another question. Feel free to hop off.
Yeah, I just had a quick little follow-up regarding the case interview. Like, you're not actually allowed to use a piece of paper when they ask you questions, or are you?
That's a great question. Yes, you can. You can, whether it's in person or virtual. And there's actually quite a bit of strategy and tactics on how you want to structure that piece of paper for success for the case interview. So you can certainly use a piece of paper, and it is encouraged.
Interesting. Thank you.
Naoya, let's quickly touch on the recruitment process.
Awesome. So recruitment process. So if you're assuming you're joining from undergrad, for internships, there will often be 2 types of pools. There will be the sophomore summer timeline pool, which would begin at the end of your freshman year. There's somewhere between the end of your freshman year to the beginning of your sophomore year. Now, these sophomore programs tend to be more targeted towards a particular school or type of profile. But these, if you do qualify, these programs are frankly the best opportunity for you to get into the firm while the bar is lower per se, right? The interview process for a sophomore intern is not nearly as hard as the interview process for a junior intern. And then if you get the sophomore internship and do fine, you'll get the return to the junior year summer without having to re-interview. So that's on the sophomore. Most, if not all, consulting firms will have the junior summer internship, which is open to everybody. So this is where most everybody hopefully will apply, with the caveat that let's say you don't get the junior year internship, it's totally okay, because there's actually a third process which we call full-time recruiting, where let's say you're a senior having completed a junior internship somewhere else, you can apply during your senior fall to become a full-time business analyst at McKinsey per se. And as it's noted here, let's say a consulting firm takes 100 analysts for full-time. Half of that would have come from the intern pool. Or said differently, half the full-time class weren't interns and instead were hired during their senior year. So your chances definitely do not disappear after your junior year. And that's one thing I really want to stress, because I've had countless mentors and friends who, may not have worked with them during their junior year, but they buckled up and grinded a little bit more and then landed their dream job for their senior year. So again, this is really frequent in consulting, and hope, yeah, so.
Perfect. So Naoya, we appreciate you joining us tonight. I was going to go into my whole spiel about how you guys should be asking questions now, and now's the time, but you guys have been asking some really, really amazing questions. Before we jump into more of a formalized Q&A, if you guys have more questions, if you want to learn more about consulting and how Naoya can help you achieve your goal, no matter where you are in the process, whether you're a high school senior or a college freshman, or you're in your sophomore or junior year, feel free to book a 15-minute free intro call with the StepStone team. We can help you understand your goals, what you're looking for, and then we can put you in touch with Naoya to figure out how we can best help you there. Naoya offers a number of different packages, whether it's an hourly package or a group session if you have a few friends who are also interested. And he also has a comprehensive all-in-one package that takes you from the beginning all the way from resume creation, cover letter creation, to networking, to actually applying for the applications, to the interviews, all the way to landing the job. So again, we would encourage you guys to throw some time on our calendar, and we would be happy to connect. But Ariel, if I'll kick it over to you. I know we had some questions that were from when people were signing up, so we can touch on those.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, Naoya. That was incredibly insightful, very detailed, very helpful. I know I even learned a lot on that call. To Naoya's point, this all starts much earlier than people expect. It ends up creeping up on you, but there are very important steps you need to start taking from freshman, sophomore year to position yourself. So hopefully this touched on some of that. We'll now open it up to Q&A, so feel free to raise your hands, come off mute, and ask your question. I know there was one that actually came in the chat. So Stella asked, how did you manage the pressure or job stress?
Yeah, that's a great question. Listen, I think part of the answer is no one quite figures it out. And it's a part of being an adult. But that aside, right, I think a few things. One, the biggest thing is, partners might be screaming at you, clients might be really mad, but in consulting, even if you mess up, nobody's going to die. Right. And I think it's just really important to contextualize things sometimes. So that's one. I think number two, you build confidence over time. And once you build confidence, things turn from stress to excitement, because you feel like you actually know how to do something. And so you get excited about it instead of being confused and stressed, or maybe tired and stressed. Right. I think for that to be successful, you really have to invest in your first year as an analyst, right? You might be, it's your first year working, so you might be staffed on a client project, and then, you might wrap up at 6 or 7, and then you might be a little tired and want to hang out, do something else. Invest that extra 1 to 2 hours during your first year to get better at Excel or get better at PowerPoint, right? Or read up more on the client or something. And the investment of your own skill will really reap reward in your second and third year. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third thing I'll say quickly is most people in consulting tend to be good. And as I mentioned, you spend a lot of time with them, right? So you're not always stressed alone. You might be stressed as a team a lot, but it's not so bad, you know, when you're staying in decently nice hotels and, you know, you can go eat a nice dinner after you work a really long time.
And Naoya, who's paying for those dinners?
Not us.
Yeah,
All right, where was
question
the coolest? Oh yeah, go ahead.
So I just have some question before I leave, but I gotta go right now. Is it okay if I can connect you on LinkedIn and then I can follow up with a question?
So yeah, you can feel free to connect with Naoya on LinkedIn, but for any questions regarding your trajectory and coaching, like definitely feel free to book a free intro call with us and we can handle that.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Or if you have a specific question now for the benefit of the group, feel free to ask it as well.
No, I gotta go now. All right, thank you. Bye.
Sure.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
Anyone else? Go ahead,
Any
Ariel.
final questions? I think we only have a minute left here. Naoya, what is the coolest client location you had to travel to?
I don't have a good answer. I do actually have one. Miami, low-key, Charlotte, North Carolina. They have beautiful
Yeah, that's a good one.
breweries and
Yeah.
amazing weather. And then San Diego, as long as you're not paying anything out of your own pocket. So, and then the worst places I've been to, you know, I hope I don't offend anyone here, but I would say St. Louis, Missouri, where I had to eat barbecue nonstop for 4 months. And then Hartford, Connecticut, which by Manhattan takes longer. It just takes an incredibly long time, and you can only get there by car. Maybe one last
Final question. Go ahead.
question here. Extracurriculars. Hartford is, yeah, sure. Hartford is cute, but it's really hard to get there. You know, extracurriculars. This is a tough one because people who join consulting, frankly, come from all backgrounds. You might have the super motivated business undergrad major who was in 10 business clubs. And you might have an English major who's never touched Excel before, but has really clear thinking, communication, and also critical thinking skills, right? But with that in mind, I would say the ideal profile has at least, you know, maybe one business or consulting or finance related club, something in the realm of business to showcase your interest in business. One organization for your own benefit, and that can be the same as club number one, but something that has mentors or people who are in the field, seniors are in that club who are working for the field you're interested in. And then the third type is what I call fun or passion. I think to the point of having a personal story, it's really important to kind of have, you know, what's your secret sauce, right? Or what's kind of your differentiating factor? You know, it can even be something really, really odd, like, actually, my example wasn't so odd, but you know, I was a leader for one of the local nonprofits in the Cornell, in the Ithaca in New York area where Cornell is, you know, and so I think having diverse clubs are good, but again, there's no single playbook. And a little more about what's your, like, does it give a clear story for you? And again, since it is a little case dependent, I'm happy to, you know, give reviews and feedback on a case by case basis.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Naoya. That was incredibly helpful. We'll be following up with a video recording as well as additional information of today's session via email. And be on the lookout for our private equity intro call, which is actually this upcoming Sunday. Thank you so much for the time, and we'll be in touch. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate everyone taking the time.
Have a good one.